Yeah, I know. It's 360, yeah. I'll tell everyone, thank you. Jeannie noticed. And then... Welcome, everyone. Welcome to worship today, and welcome those who are on Zoom, Ginger and Edna and Charles, and welcome everyone else here. I won't take attendance and tell you who's sitting in the pews right here. That'd be kind of rude, but it's wonderful to have you all here. And I am going to sort of combine announcements and welcome. Of course, if you have a joy or sorrow, make sure I have it. And if you put it in the chat for you, those of you at home, I'll try to remember to look for it, okay? Of course, I always forget, but I don't even know where my pocketbook is, to turn off my cell phone or put it on mute. And if you're new here, but I don't see any faces that are, make sure you sign up, so if you want to get our newsletter, you can do that and find out what's happening. Yeah, Carrie? Yes. You want me to say something and embarrass him publicly? Oh, okay. All right, welcome, Carrie. Carrie used to come here before I came here, and if you want to get newsletters, do you get the newsletter? If not, sign up and you'll find out what's happening with us. All right, welcome, everyone. And I'm doing things a little differently today, so I'm going to do the chalice lighting. Except that I don't know if this is a joy or sorrow or an announcement. It is that September 12th is really Mexican Independence Day. Forget the Cinco de Mayo. And it's called Grito de Dolores, Cry of Pains. So on this Thursday, yeah. Oh, is it the 16th? Ah, okay, well, let me, some point I'll check. Tricia gave me this. Sorry, I threw her under the bus. Anyway, the 16th, sometime this week, we will be celebrating Mexico's real Independence Day. And the chalice lighting I picked today was written by Reverend Lisa Doji. She wrote it for the Sunday after 9/11 in 2001, when she was serving a church in South Bend, Indiana. And she's now at Nora Church in Hunska, Minnesota. It's a chalice lighting for challenging times, and I think it fits the 20th anniversary of 9/11 and the fact that we've lived 18, 19 months meeting in a very odd way, having our lives upended. I'll light it. Why a flaming chalice? The question comes. It's the cup of life, we answer. A cup of blessings overflowing. A cup of water to quench our spirit's thirst. A cup of wine for celebration and dedication. The flame of truth. The fire of purification. Oil for anointing and healing. Out of chaos, fear, and horror, this was the symbol crafted more than a generation ago, after World War II. So may it be for us in these days of uncertainty, sorrow, and rage, a light to warm our souls and guide us home. And it is so good that so many of us are here home. Do we have any joys and sorrows? I don't see any in the back. Yes.
Glad to be home.
Glad to be home. And also, you lost a nephew.
Yes.
Your nephew, Phil Rue, died. How many weeks ago?
2 weeks.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah. He'd been ill for a couple of years, so it's a blessing in some respects.
Yeah, it's always so mixed, right? Blessing, but a big hole. Any other joys or sorrows? Obviously, I want to lift up Jim Horton, friend, member, longtime participant here. Once people had heard After he died Wednesday, whenever I got an email or talked to anybody on the phone, I would get to hear another Jim story. So if you don't remember it, I'll tell it for you. One was from Jay Jenkins saying, we both served in Vietnam. We didn't always see eye to eye. Make sure kids know that war is terrible. That's what Jay sent me. Does anyone have a story they'd like to share? And of course, you could put it in the chat if you're not here. Yes, Howard. And Howard, yeah, we have to give you the microphone so people can hear you. Yeah. Wow, it's nice to see your face.
Thank you. A while ago, I went to Circle K to get gas. And when I came out, Jim was out there eating an ice cream cone, which I guess he wasn't supposed to. So when I said, "Hi, Jim," he looked at me like a kid with his hand in the cookie jar. And I'm like, "How you doing?" He's like, "Okay." And so I went to leave, and he goes, "Don't tell Karen." Yeah, that's when he's driving.
Anyone else? Jean McKean up here. Yeah, sorry to make you run.
A little bit of history here. 1996, we had just left the Pintec Ranch and moved into the Tombstone Senior Center. And our convener, she wouldn't let herself be called president, Phyllis Prickett, she knew Jim Horton, and she knew that he would make a good speaker for our group. So the first time I saw Jim was at the Senior Center when Jim and Tricia, and did you come to that too, Karen? I can't remember. No, he went. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, he was a wonderful speaker. And they came and spoke, and we had a wonderful turnout, and they just stayed the whole time. Oh, that's right. We always had potlucks in those days, and that was an attractive draw to the men especially, I think.
And it was about water, right?
Yeah, the water.
It was about water. By then, I had been working with Jim, 6 months or a year on water issues. And I knew how unpopular he was with many members of the community. And so I was impressed that anybody would invite him to be a speaker on water issues because he was controversial. And so I said, boy, I got to go see this group that's invited Jim to be a speaker. And indeed, we kept going after that, and potlucks Jim was very impressed by having a potluck afterwards.
I'm not sure if I met Jim at that meeting. I know I was there, and I remember meeting him there, or if I met him earlier at Southwest Wings. But I do remember being impressed when he was a speaker for Southwest Wings, and he got up and he did a variation of "You Know You're a Redneck" that went along the lines of, "You know you're a birder when you say, 'Look at them great tits,' and you're talking about birds."
That's an incredibly favorite line among male birders.
It was very ironic that somebody who was such a great speaker, who was always asked to MC things or roast people, at the end of his life, because of the Parkinson's symptoms, he hardly could speak at all. Very sad. And he did join UU because of the potluck.
I know Gary told me that he was very sad to hear about this.
You know that Jim and Karen organized a number of trips for this church, including one to Turkey, which was just an incredible trip. But I recall that we went down to the Rio Sonora in Mexico, to a very sleepy town, where Jim insisted on celebrating my birthday with margaritas and leading a cha-cha line through the patio area of the hotel, with all the locals staring at us in wonder.
Well, I'm so grateful I got to know him. I'm really grateful to hear the stories of him before all this. Joyce said that you two didn't often always see eye to eye, but you really argued well, right? He was a good person to talk with. And I know that Jean said he had somewhat of a sunny disposition. A yellow rose would be okay, and that's what Diane Davis could provide us with, because you said, Jean, you looked forward to talking with him, to conversations with him. They were always invigorating. And as you think of stories, please share them with us, with Karen. Maybe you don't have to call her at midnight to relay them, but we will want to hear them for months and years to come. So I am so grateful I got to know him. And we honor him today with our rose and our memories. Thank you. Thank you for sharing him with us, Karen. Obviously, afterwards, we don't have a coffee hour, but we tend to talk. So if you have more stories you think of, as long as you're not too mushy, Karen says you can share them with her. All righty. Let us sing what I think is a perfect welcoming song, and it's 360. I do so many iterations of slides and bulletins. I got it wrong. So 360, here we have gathered.
Everyone knows this one, so let's hear it through the masks and all.
Oh, yeah. Here we have gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of a lifetime, matters small and great. We of all ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Start as its battles, woes and regrets, binding shadows, let us not forget. We who now gather, each other's names, bind and heal us as we give, we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song. Excuse Please be seated. I have a story for all ages, everyone here. It's a retelling of a book called 14 Cows for America by Carmen Agradidi and illustrated by Thomas Gonzalez. But it's the story of Wilson Kimeli Neoma. And so I'm going to tell his story. My name is Wilson. I'm sometimes called Kimeli. And one day in the spring of 2002, I came home to my village in Kenya. And he does this thing where he touches each child on top of their head. It's a warrior's blessing. He grew up in this village, but during 9/11, he had a scholarship to New York City and was living there then. And he said that his heart was deeply broken by so many mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers dying and leaving their families bereft. He had learned from his Maasai elders, when he first moved there, he'd been shown kindness, as he would have been in his own village, by people taking him in and helping him get educated. He felt like America had become his second home, and on 9/11, he felt like his second home was under attack. He saw firefighters and police officers risk their own lives to save people. My warrior heart could not sit still in me. I wanted to do something to help. So he came back in the spring of 2002 and approached his elders after he saw the young ones. He went on and found his elders. When he was a child, he had spent a lot of time with them. His mother had said he was too gentle to be a true warrior. He would feed nesting birds and save ants from drowning in puddles. You can't be a warrior, you're too gentle. But when he spent time with the elders in his community, they told him something different. They said that our ancestors valued compassion and kindness toward anyone in need, the orphan, the widow, the stranger. To heal the pain in someone's heart, they told me, you give them something that is close to your heart. When he was a boy living with his elders, he had loved the cows. As a Maasai boy, you are like a calf in the herd. You drink milk from the cow, and you feel protected by the bull. His mama was too poor to own a cow, so his big dream was one day having the money to be able to buy her a cow. But he had decided there was something he needed to do. He needed to offer sacrifice in the way of my people. To heal a sorrowing heart, you give something that is dear to you. So when he came back in the spring of 2002, he had enough money to buy a cow, a symbol of life to our people. That would be my offering to the Americans. He said some pains are too big to carry in one chest. He would ask the elders in his village to bless the cow, to make it a special gift, to take away some of the sadness in American hearts. But when the people of the village heard his stories about 9/11, saw his tears, the ancient heart of my people was stirred up, he said. When I presented my gift for blessing, others offered up their own precious cows. 14 cows were blessed that day. It was a great moment in my village. We were helping to heal a people far away. And then in June of 2002, the American ambassador came to our village to accept the cows. The Star-Spangled Banner played over a loudspeaker during the ceremony. Although my people did not understand the song, they stood along with the Americans and placed their hands across their chests. Seeing hundreds of Maasai standing with him in respectful silence made the American diplomat cry. His tears caught the Maasai by surprise, and we were all swept up by the deep emotion of the moment. he said. A connection between the two cultures had been made. We felt we had taken some of America's pain into our Maasai hearts. These sacred healing cows can never be slaughtered. They remain in their care in Kenya under the guidance of the revered elder Mzee Ole Yampoi. The original 14 have calved. The herd now numbers over 35, but I'm sure it numbers many more 20 years later. They continue to be a symbol of hope from the Maasai to their brothers and sisters in America. The Maasai wish that every time Americans hear the simple story of 14 cows, they will find a measure of comfort and peace. And so I offer you that story, and to all of you, as a measure of comfort and peace. How many of you were touched by how the world responded to 9/11? Yeah. I was serving a different denomination at that time, the United Church of Christ, and our president was in Germany when all this happened, and the Germans just poured out love on him. It was so powerful to be there then, probably even better than being back in New York City at that time. I wondered if any of you had stories about 9/11 that you wanted to share today. I don't know. Yes, okay, we need sorry guys.
Do I need a microphone?
Well, yes, because, yeah. We know you're loud and sorry, you have good projection skills.
Hogs off of 40 acres. Just yesterday, watching some of the remembrances on TV, it brought back something to me. On the day of 9/11 in England, the royal band, whatever it's called, in the courtyard of Kensington Palace or wherever, played the national anthem of the United States. They did it again yesterday. And I thought that was very much a tribute to our kinship with the United Kingdom.
Given we were such bad brats with them, I found that at that time very comforting, that we had had such a bad war with them. And yet so many centuries later, we are, it gives me hope when we go to war with people. Yes, Diane?
Actually, I was in Germany for 9/11. My husband was stationed over there. And I knew something was going on because I'd lost my ID card. I put it in the mailbox, so I had to go to the police station, whatever they call it, to pick it up. But anyhow, they weren't paying attention to me. They were whatever. My husband called and he said, I don't know what's going on, but you better go home and pack your NEO bag. And for the non-military, I don't know what it stands for, but it means in case you have to get out of town really fast. And they didn't know what was going on at first. Anyhow, the part I wanted to tell was the next time when we went on to post, all the Germans were bringing flowers to the main gates. They couldn't get on post, but they were bringing flowers. And
Also comforting to know we've been at war with them and we're now good buddies.
The Diane story about the flowers reminded me. I was in the Netherlands on 9/11. I was there for a class, believe it or not, in international criminal law at The Hague. But on that day, we were in Utrecht listening to a lecture, and that's how we found out. But the following day, we went to the U.S. Embassy. We couldn't get on any more than anybody else could get on. But the most remarkable thing for me was all these people bringing flowers on bicycles. They're on bicycles, bringing flowers. They were undoubtedly, most of them, locals. You know, a little hard to take a bicycle on the plane, although I suppose you could rent one if you didn't have one. But I assumed most of them were locals, leaving all these flowers, not saying anything, setting them down, oftentimes just waiting a moment reverently and riding away.
I also happened to be in Germany at an international rainwater harvesting conference with someone that many of you know, Cato Daly. And on a break from a class, some students called me into the general room and they pointed on the screen. And I looked at this scene, which I thought was from an old horror movie. And I, nudged him and said, "Hi, yeah." He said, no, it's real. So we watched it in horror. And then we continued with the conference. There wasn't much else to do, but everybody there from around the world was full of condolences. And one of the strangest things for me personally is that when Cato and I went to the airport, we of course didn't know if we could get out or not, but our flight was scheduled on the very first day that flights resumed. And we walked past thousands of people who were camped in the airport whose flights had been canceled. And I said, that doesn't seem fair. I felt so guilty, but that was how the airlines worked it. If yours was scheduled that day, you got to go. And they had to be on standby for whenever they could get out. That was weird.
Does anyone else have a share? I'm sure you have stories you may not want to share. They may be too close to home. Or how many of you knew somebody who was killed by the attack? Wow, Sally knew someone. Wow. Yeah. Oh, so, and he came from inner city DC on a plane with his teacher. He'd won a scholarship, and they went into the Pentagon. Oh, heartbreaking. But all the stories aren't they? Yeah. Heartbreaking. Yeah, I spent a lot of yesterday watching remembrances and watching, there's a really good PBS special called 9/11 Generation, talking to a number of young people whose fathers were killed that day and were born later. And, the stories are just, it's interesting to me how many of them went on to have younger siblings. So their mothers remarried and had, continued their families. More seemed to have younger siblings than not, which was pretty amazing. One of them, his father was killed in the Pentagon, and his mother had breast cancer and died within 4 months, I think, of his birth. But he had the most amazing uncle and aunt, and he said, given everything that had happened to me in the beginning, it's turned out as well as it could. So we have these stories, and again, I just couldn't come to the 20th anniversary and not remember and talk about them and be together as a community in that. So I titled our message today, that proverb, a grief shared is a grief halved. Do we believe that? Is it really true? Do telling stories, does that really help? Well, I think yes and no. I think, as we heard from the story about the women in Rwanda going to a safe place, sharing their stories, helped them sleep at night. But as this woman who was in a grief group said, There's some stories we can't hear. They're hard to hear. Sometimes we can't take them in, but at least we give ears to someone who needs to speak. And some stories are hard to share because our experiences are so specific, so unique. It may not fit. The group we go to may not work for us. The hospice I work for has a grief group that meets every Monday. They also started a sudden loss group because that's a different kind of grief. They have, it can be different if you go to a grief group for children, but your child committed suicide or your child was killed by murder. All these griefs have different timelines, have different guilts, have different emotions. Sometimes it's hard to meet with other people if they don't get you. The children I was listening to describe their lives, the people on Generation 9/11 who were born after their fathers died, talk about how 9/11 is an odd day for them. One of them is a young athlete, and his coaches usually will come up and say, "We know this is a hard week, hard day. Just get through it however you have to. We're with you." And that helps him. One young woman gets a lot of messages on 9/11, and she thinks, well, that's really nice, but I wasn't thinking about it till you reminded me. But also, this really is a day for my mother. The day itself, I wasn't even alive yet. I don't have memories of seeing that happen. It's a day for my mother, not for me. So it's interesting how grief can be different for each one of us. It can be experienced in different ways. And it can be helpful to meet with other people, but sometimes it's not. If they don't understand what it means to have a young child die, what it means to have a parent die later in life, what suicide can do, all the different things we experience in our lives. My father, I think I've told this story, my father was a fighter pilot in the South Pacific, and he would say to us, I feel like every day I had afterwards was like icing on the cake. So I met some survivors of the Battle of the Bulge, and I repeated that, and they looked at me like I had three heads. Their experience was so different, icing on the cake made no sense to them. They had experienced a different grief, a different life, a different war from my father, who lost everybody but 3 people in his squadron, but experienced it differently. It's always really helpful to try to understand what is useful with other people. Elizabeth Edwards, who was the wife of John Edwards, who ran for president, her son, Wade, was killed in a freak car accident that flipped his Jeep on the way down to the beach in North Carolina. And after he died, she went up to a friend who had also lost a child and said, I am so sorry, I was useless to you. And her friend said, most people who have children don't even want to go there in their heads. It's as if you're inviting this disaster by imagining it. And Elizabeth Edwards gives some really good advice for working with people whose children have died. They want to know their child will go on and has a memory and has a legacy. Because one of the things that happens when someone has died young is they don't have a future. They don't have this legacy, this thing that they should have had. And so she was really happy when the youth at Wade School helped her design a scholarship and a computer lab in his honor so that he would have a legacy. It's not very easy to know what people need when they're grieving, what we need when we're grieving. Often the most important thing we can do is listen. And I have this one piece of advice that is somewhat useful. I thought this was the prettiest image I could find. I wanted to change Lee out. So it's about someone named Lee, okay? So this is actually quite useful, and it's called the kvetching circle or the ring theory. And it was written by psychologists Susan Silk and Barry Goldman. And it's about a really constructive way to handle grief, which is, if you're in the center, you're the person to whom the crisis is happening. You get to complain out and say whatever you need to. But as the circle goes out, first it's the person facing the crisis. Then right outside is the immediate family. Then just beyond are close friends. Then other friends and family, colleagues, acquaintances, it goes out. If you're an acquaintance and you're visiting someone in the hospital, you don't see the person who's sick and then turn to their spouse and say, oh my goodness, I don't think I can do this. They look terrible. That's not very helpful. That's dumping in. You're supposed to dump out, not dump in. It makes a lot of sense to me. So the person, does that make sense to all of you here? Yeah. And it was very helpful to me to have this and to talk to my hospice about it. I think most people who are there understand this and do this. But it's one of the more useful things I've found about grief and our differences in grief and our commonalities in grief. Another thing that was very comforting to me was in seminary. We often had these strange battles about my pain is bigger than your pain. You're a woman, but you're a white woman. I'm a black woman. I've suffered more. You may want to call God he or she or nothing at all, but I never had a dad, and so I want to call God he, because God is my dad. There were these battles that were painful, and they were based on levels of suffering. And then one day, a good friend from South Africa announced, we can use our pain in one way. All of us have experienced suffering. All of us have felt pain. If we stay away from these silly competitions, and this is a friend who, spent his childhood almost as a slave in South Africa, earning the money half the year by selling popsicles and ice cream to go to school the other half of the year, and now has a PhD and teaches at universities. But he had this beautiful way of saying, we can all connect on the level of pain. If we feel that and we connect together there, then we can have a discussion. If we start talking about levels of it, we lose the connection. So I always thought that was important. I want to end today by talking a little bit about experiencing your own grief when you're in a public place, and how you can feel either empowered or disempowered and not really present. There's a woman who used to live in this town and moved away to Tucson who had a young child die of cancer. And every year she would have a run in his honor and raise money. And I remember gathering there, and instead of making it a prayer for everybody who'd lost a child, whatever age the child, for everybody who had had a recent loss, it was just about her son who died. And it was very difficult for me. I've had 4 miscarriages, and so for me, it was very odd. I felt a lot of pain standing there, but I couldn't honor it in that setting. Whenever I do a memorial service, I talk about the person, but I also talk about all the other pain we bring with us, right? How often have you gone to a service and found yourself crying, even though you didn't know the person, because they reminded you of your father or your brother, or you just needed a good cry that day? How many of you have ever done that? Yeah. And so there are some stories that may be hard to share out loud, that haunt you still, some memories from 9/11 that are still with you. So I thought I'd take a few minutes for any of you who feel that. And of course, I forgot during the joys and sorrows to throw in, for the ones we heard, and some extra for the unspoken ones. You may have some unspoken memories that weigh you down, that you don't want to share with everyone in the world because, well, you don't want to implant that image in someone else's head, right? Or you may not feel comfortable to do it yet. But if you have one that you would like to offer up unspoken, into this community to hold for you, somewhat like those ears that can hear but not take in every word. Please come up and put a stone in our bowl. So I'm going to start. I should have warned you. And I'm going to put it plenty in for all the stories that need to be held today, but can't be put into words. May you know that all your stories have beauty and worth, no matter the pain, and they are taken up and gathered. And any time you throw an intention into water, a ripple effect goes out to the world. We hear you, we love you, we hold this for you. May we all be in peace. The song that we picked for the offertory really fits the situation, but you may never have heard it before. It talks about September and memories. It's number 336. So I will hand out the baskets to the ushers, and we will sing this. All my memories of love hang upon high stars. All the souls I've lost to tears now the autumn jars. And the air of my thickens with their song. Sing again their nameless tune, again and strong. Willows in September touch water clear, set among the May we go forth knowing that we are a community. I didn't say where I was going to do the closing song, did I? We'll do it after the chalice extinguishing. May we go forth knowing that we are a beloved community, that we hold one another, that we are a tree that keeps alive the memories of the many lives that have touched us, a tree that has a place for us in the branches, a tree of nourishment and growth that will nourish, whether we see them in church or not, many generations to come. So go in peace. And the final song is 166. It's Years Are Coming, but it's to the same tune as Blue Boat Home.
Everyone knows it.
Years are coming, speed them onward, and the soul shall gather rust, and the helmet dance and measure, sleep at last in silent dust. Earth has heard too long of battle, the trumpet's voice too long, but another age advances, fears foretold in ancient song. Years are coming when forever war's red banner shall be furled, and the age of peace be welcomed, each and a happy world, where with song and glorious herald, and the soul shall gather rust, and the helmet lance and falchion free at last in silent death. And again, may you go forth. Aidan Ballou, who wrote this, just lived in the 19th century and obviously saw the Civil War and had no reason to believe peace would last forever and war would end. And we don't either, but I hope we go forth with that in mind, working for that day. So go in peace to bring it and be peacemakers.